Across the vastness of the galaxy, there were worlds where children's first lessons were not in letters or words, but in how to strip, assemble, and fire a weapon, where the thunder of artillery became a lullaby, and the tremors of bombardments felt like the heartbeat of a restless giant. One such world was Castria, a fortress planet carved from stone and blood. Every child born beneath its skies grew up knowing that death was inevitable. The only question was how long it could be delayed. Even in the final days before Castria's fall, its soldiers remained stationed across distant outposts scattered through the galaxy. Forgotten bases, abandoned by commanders who no longer remembered them. Yet the men and women there held the line, serving to their last breath. To them, peace was not a concept, it was an impossible dream. One such outpost was Base 47 Delta, buried deep in the frozen wastes of Norris Prime, a desolate world at the edge of Imperial space. Its structure was simple, concrete and steel walls strong enough to withstand nuclear fire, crowned by a towering antenna that cut through the storm of warp static to relay signals. But the true strength of that base was not in stone or iron, it was in the weary eyes that kept watch. Here were stationed the 59th Shock Troops of Castria. Sent 3 years earlier, only 50 of them now remained, survivors of battles erased from official history. For them, this outpost was not exile. It was the last trust they had been given to guard. Their commander was Captain Elaris Vark, born at Castria's very gates, in a settlement where enemy ships hammered the shields above the horizon each day. At 6 years old, he first held a lasgun. By 13, he could reassemble it blindfolded. His eyes carried the iron weight of one who had faced death too many times and lived. At his side stood Sergeant Corin Thal, his body a map of scars. Each wound was a relic of the brutal trials of his youth. The deepest scar came from the trial of iron endurance, when he was buried alive in a coffin of steel for 3 days. Many broke within hours, screaming in madness. Thal endured in silence, and when he emerged, that silence became his mark forever. The others came from every walk of Castrian life. A factory worker who could assemble or repair anything with steel and a wrench. A farm boy whose aim was so precise, even a common rifle became a sniper's weapon in his hands. A child once left alone to man a heavy bolter, holding enemies back for hours. And one who had dreamed of becoming a doctor until war killed that dream as surely as it had killed his home. Together they kept Base 47 Delta alive. Their days passed in endless drills, patrols through the frozen night, and evening memorials to the fallen. The walls of their barracks were etched with names, names of those who would never return. But one day the routine shattered. On patrol, they intercepted a broken, corrupted signal, a distress call repeating endlessly. Somewhere to the north, a ship had gone down. Its beacon cried out across the ice, desperate, fading. Captain Vark made his choice. "We're going," he said. "If we don't answer, no one will." After 2 days of trudging through endless snow, they reached the wreck. The sky above was a heavy gray, and in the ice below lay a massive crater. At its heart, the broken husk of a starship was half buried, its metal scorched black by fire, its twisted frame still carrying the faint stench of smoke. Emergency beacons still flickered across its ruined spine, like a heartbeat refusing to stop, like someone inside still clinging to hope. But when the soldiers forced open the hatch, what waited for them inside was not human. They found corpses, but corpses that defied the word. Arms warped into talons, torsos split open into gaping mouths, skin studded with clusters of mismatched eyes. Flesh that looked melted, reshaped, congealed into grotesque new forms. It was chaos given shape. Felix Harrow, the one who had once dreamed of being a doctor, knelt to examine the remains. His voice was cold, flat. "They're not dead. There's movement still inside them. They're not decaying. They're growing. Among the wreckage, a logbook was discovered. Its last entries were scrawled in a desperate, trembling hand. The warp storm tore through the jailer fields. Dreams became voices. Voices became reality. Orders broke apart. We began to fight ourselves. The last thing I can write, the Imperium protects. But from what? Captain Vok wasted no time. "We're leaving," he ordered. "This corruption does not follow us back." But it was already too late. On the return journey, Marcus Dane, the sniper, collapsed into the snow, eyes wide, muttering as if to someone no one else could see. I'm seeing colors that have no names, hearing voices no one speaks." From that moment, the quiet of Base 47 Delta was shattered. The Vox antenna began to broadcast strange whispers in the night. In the barracks, objects long lost began to reappear, where men swore they had left them years ago. The voices of the dead echoed through the halls, friends who had fallen long ago, speaking in tones of comfort, of accusation, of laughter. And then, one night, the dead came back. They did not return as men, but as shadows, walking with broken, jagged movements, like shattered bones held together by hate. They spoke with the voices of old comrades, sometimes accusing, sometimes consoling, sometimes laughing. But they were not illusions. Their touch left marks. Their weapons fired rounds that counted. Even the auspex and servitors recorded their presence. The line between the living and the dead no longer existed. The return of the dead left Base 47 Delta suspended between a graveyard and a sanctuary. Soldiers kept their weapons ready, but more often than not, the shadows that appeared before them wore the faces of their fallen comrades. Sometimes they smiled, sometimes they taunted, sometimes they mimed raising a weapon to fire. But the true terror had not yet come. One night, the skies above the frozen world erupted in swirls of green and gold light, as though the void itself had caught fire. In that instant, all the shadows fell silent. A new voice filled the base, not through radios, but inside the mind of every soldier. The voice was gentle, warm, almost paternal. "We are not your enemies. We have come to deliver you. We are the saviors of humanity. Your suffering can end. All you must do is accept us." Captain Vok's response was immediate. "Light the emergency beacons. Everyone to battle stations." The men knew well. The sweeter the offer, the deadlier the poison. From childhood, every Castrian was taught the same truth. Unknown powers never bring salvation. They always demand a price. The first assault came not against their walls, but against their minds. Each soldier was forced to confront his deepest weakness. Captain Vok saw himself as a boy again, cowering in a bunker while Chaos Marines butchered his parents just outside. Sergeant Corin Thal found himself once more in the coffin of his trial. But this time the steel was crushing inward, his bones breaking, his lungs collapsing. The visions were too personal. No stranger could have known such things. But the soldiers of Castria did not break. They roared oaths of hate, chanted hymns to the Emperor, and shouted aloud the names of their martyred comrades until their courage burned brighter than fear. When fear failed, the visitors turned to temptation. "We can make you stronger. You will never miss again. You will never fail again. We can give your fallen brothers back to you." The offer cut deep. Every man harbored a hidden dream of being more than human. And in that moment, Marcus Dane broke. The sniper dropped his weapon and drifted forward as if in a trance, eyes shining with an unnatural metallic gleam. His voice trembled, but it was full of longing. "They're giving me my aim back. I'll be perfect again. I'll never miss." Every soldier felt their hearts lurch. Dane's unerring shot had defined him, and when chaos had stolen that precision from him, it had hollowed him out. Now temptation had filled that void. Captain Vark did not hesitate. He raised his pistol and fired a single round into Dane's chest. Surprise flashed across the sniper's eyes, then darkness. His body crumpled to the ground. At once the spell shattered. The remaining soldiers awoke from the trance, their minds clear again. But the enemy had learned, and the next strike would be far more dangerous. Dane's death had brought a fleeting calm to the base, but that calm was short-lived. The next assault came suddenly, so suddenly no one had time to react. One moment the soldiers stood at their posts, weapons ready. The next they found themselves in a chamber that defied description. Its walls were of black stone, stretching outward without end. There was no ceiling, no floor, only a vast emptiness. And at the chamber's center stood a figure. Its body was made of both light and shadow, clothed in a shifting robe where stars flickered and suns collapsed. Where its face should have been was only a hollow void, as deep as the abyss within which entire galaxies drifted. When it spoke, its voice rang like the echo of creation itself. Children of the corpse god, your resistance is admirable but useless. Accept our gift, ascend or perish. At that moment, Ma Korun screamed. Her body twisted, bones shattered, new flesh sprouted. A long arm split into talons, her face stretched into the muzzle of a wolf. And yet her eyes remained her own, burning with defiance. Through the growl of her changing throat, she spat, "Damn you! I am human, not your slave!" The entity punished her. Her body tore itself apart and reformed, again and again, dying, reviving, dying once more. A spectacle meant to break the other's will, but it had the opposite effect. Felix Harrow raised his surgical blades with a cry. Voos opened fire with his lasgun, bolts blazing. Sergeant Thal hurled a grenade at the creature's feet. Their weapons could not wound its form, but the false chamber around them began to crack. The infinite walls quaked. The entity laughed, a sound like collapsing stars. Your god has abandoned you. What has loyalty bought you? Pain, loneliness, death. Captain Vark stepped forward. He leveled his pistol straight at the void where its eyes should have been. His voice was as unyielding as stone. The Imperium protects, not because we deserve it, but because we are humanity's last wall. You can break our bodies, you can burn our minds, but you will never touch our souls. As long as one of us still breathes, you will never claim victory. The words struck deep into the very foundations of that false reality. The chamber trembled. Darkness split apart. The entity's light flickered and waned. Reality began to return, and suddenly they were back. The concrete walls of Base 47 Delta surrounded them once more, but they were not alone. From the walls, golden light began to seep. Shapes emerged, radiant figures of pure brilliance. Not the ghosts of the dead, nor illusions of the enemy. They were something else entirely. Like angels descending, their presence both terrifying and divine. Golden light wrapped itself around the cold walls of the base. Where once there had been only shadows and fear, a sense of calm and strength now spread. Radiant figures emerged, human in stature, but their very essence was made of light and purity. Their steps did not touch the floor, and in their eyes shimmered the vastness of galaxies. One figure stepped forward. Its voice did not strike the ears, but resonated within the heart. "Well done, faithful soldiers. Your resistance has been witnessed. The corruption is cleansed. But beware, the enemy never sleeps." Captain Vark bowed his head in silence, though his eyes still carried questions. The golden figure turned to Korun, whose body had been twisted beyond recognition. In a single gesture, her broken form was restored, bones mended, torn flesh whole again. She stood human once more, but the pain in her eyes remained, the torment of dying 1,000 deaths still etched deep within. Felix Harrow trembled as he spoke. "Is this salvation? Is this victory?" The figure answered, "This is only the beginning. You have been made whole. Your weapons and walls are cleansed. But remember, purity demands vigilance. The enemy's greatest triumph is to convince mankind that he does not exist." The soldiers exchanged glances. For a fleeting moment, hope stirred in their hearts. Yet, along with it came a heavier weight, the knowledge that this war was far from over. In truth, it was only going to grow longer. At dawn's first light, the golden beings faded like mist, but their presence lingered. The machines of the base hummed with renewed life, the atmosphere felt lighter, and even the eternal ice of Norris Prime seemed softer beneath their boots. That night, the soldiers held their memorial. A new name was carved into their walls, Marcus Dane. And as they spoke his name in unison, a faint whisper passed through the air, as if he had answered them one final time, a quiet farewell. 3 months passed at base 47 Delta, and an unnatural calm settled over it. No disturbances, no shadows. The machines worked flawlessly, supply drops arrived on time, and for the first time it felt as if the barren world of Norris Prime had grown less hostile. Captain Vark sent his report to High Command. His words were cold, precise, clinical. A wrecked vessel was discovered, tainted influences contained, no remaining threat. Everything else, the golden figures, the return of the dead, was buried under the label psychological stress and hallucination. But the truth remained carved into the heart of every soldier. Then new orders arrived. Their assignment at the outpost was over. They were being redeployed to an agricultural world, Dita III. Just 6 months of routine guard duty. The journey began. The path through the warp was strangely clear. No storms, no disturbances. Inside the ship, everything functioned perfectly, too perfectly. And it was this perfection that felt like the greatest danger of all. Felix Harrow noticed it first. "Where are your scars?" he asked. "The wounds, the marks, how did they all vanish?" It was true. Sergeant Thal's old gashes had sealed as though they'd never existed. Corin could feel electricity hum beneath her fingertips. Vu's accuracy had grown beyond anything human, surpassing even Marcus Dane's legendary aim. And Captain Vark himself no longer knew fatigue. Sleepless nights left him sharper, stronger, unbroken. They were no longer the same men and women who had manned Base 47 Delta. Something had changed. But was it a gift? Or was it preparation? At the end of their 6th month, another order came. Immediate redeployment. And this time, the command bypassed even Captain Vark's authority. An Inquisitor was coming aboard to take them. On the night before departure, Harrow ran a DNA test. What he found stole the ground from beneath their feet. Their genes had been altered. Strange codes, patterns etched like script, designs beyond the reach of human science. They were not simply soldiers anymore. They were samples, living experiments. The galaxy was shifting. Old enemies were awakening. And now these troops were no longer just human. They were being shaped into something else, something meant for a war yet to come. That night, Captain Vark closed his eyes, and a voice rose in his dreams. Not the whispers of the dead, not the temptations of the visitors. This voice was absolute, commanding, sovereign. "Prepare yourselves. The next war is not the one you have faced before. The enemy will not be before you. The enemy will be within you." Vark's eyes opened. He whispered into the darkness, "The Imperium protects. But perhaps this time we may need protection from ourselves." The Inquisitor's ship was a colossal frame of black steel, its flanks carved with the Imperial aquila. When it descended onto the dock, silence fell across the entire base, as though the void itself had drawn in a breath and refused to release it. From the dim light emerged Inquisitor Dracos. A black cloak hung from his shoulders, a golden seal gleamed across his chest, and in his hand he bore a staff etched with sacred words. His eyes were not the eyes of ordinary men. They burned with a ceaseless fire, the gaze of judgment itself. He wasted no words. "You are no longer merely soldiers. You have been given a new purpose. What you endured at Base 47 Delta was only the beginning. The changes that remain within you were not an accident. They were design." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, their hearts heavy with questions and fear. Captain Vark, steady but wary, spoke the words all of them were holding back. "Are we still human, or something else?" Dracos's face showed no emotion. His answer was as sharp as steel. "Humanity now requires warriors who can exceed its limits. Each of you is an experiment, a prototype, and you will be sent to battlefields where no ordinary man could survive." The ship tore free of the docks and plunged into the void. Warp currents clawed at its hull, but something was different. No nightmares plagued the soldiers' dreams. Instead, each of them saw the same vision: a vast, unknown fleet, a monstrous union of flesh and machine, drifting slowly through the stars. Felix Harrow was the first to speak, his voice tight with dread. "This isn't a dream, it's a warning." On the sixth day, the vessel docked at a hidden station. The station bore no name, only steel corridors marked with the sigil of the Inquisition. There, the soldiers were separated into chambers where machines and psychers probed their bodies, their minds, their very essence. And another truth was revealed. Their bodies had not only changed, they were still changing. Corin no longer merely sensed electricity, she could speak to machines. Vu's aim was flawless, so perfect she could strike without even looking. Thal's senses sharpened until he could taste the emotions of those around him. And Vark, visions whispered into his mind, flickers of events that had yet to happen. At last, Dracos summoned them together. His voice was low, absolute. "You are now a secret weapon of the Imperium, but beware. The force growing within you may be your salvation, or your destruction. The choice of which path you follow will be yours." Vark looked at his soldiers. He knew they were no longer the same men and women who had stood with him on Norris Prime. They were something else now, something forged by hands unseen. But one question burned in his heart, sharp as a blade. Were they still soldiers of the Imperium, or the result of someone else's experiment? Inquisitor Dracos gave the order. Their first mission would be to a world marked as silent in the Imperial archives, planet Varax 9. Once a thriving agricultural world, but years ago all contact had ceased. No signals, no ships returning, only a single message echoing through the void. "We have chosen." When the soldiers descended, the planet lay empty. Fields dry and barren, homes abandoned, factories silent. Yet there were no corpses, no blood. It was as if millions of people had simply vanished into the air. Vark took command. "Head for the city. We find the truth there." At the heart of the city stood a vast cathedral. The imperial aquila still adorned its walls, but beneath it were new carvings, symbols that writhed like flesh and bone, words in an alien tongue that seemed to twist as one stared at them. Then the whispers came, at first faint, then unmistakable. "Welcome. We have been waiting for you." The soldiers raised their weapons, but those who emerged were no monsters at first. They were people. Once citizens of the Imperium. Their faces looked human, but their eyes gleamed like metal, and their movements carried a strange serenity, as though another will guided them. A woman stepped forward. Her tone was soft, but her words were hollow. "We have broken the chains. We are no longer frail humans. We accepted the voice, and now we are complete. Join us, or be erased." Thal ground his teeth. "This is the same test we faced at the base, but now it's not a handful. The entire world has changed. The citizens advanced. Their bodies trembled, hands twisting into claws, voices warping into a discord of flesh and metal. Vark bellowed the order. Positions! These are not humans anymore. They've already died inside. The night erupted in fire. Last blasts lit the sky, Korun interfacing with the machines to awaken the city's defense grid, Vus' perfect aim cutting down enemy after enemy, and Harrow working desperately to tend the wounded. But the fallen did not stay dead. Their bodies reknit, flesh and steel merging into new abominations. Each enemy that dropped rose again, more grotesque than before. Then within Vark's mind, the absolute voice returned. This is your true trial. If you endure, you will be the future of mankind. If you fail, you will become one of them. Vark looked to his soldiers, and in every eye he saw the same resolve. They were ready to die, but they would never kneel. The streets of Varax 9 burned with war. Last beams split the night like suns exploding, cutting through wave after wave of foes. Yet no matter how many fell, the enemy rose again, flesh and steel reknitting into something neither fully human nor fully machine. Korun stood locked to the city's defense grid, eyes shut, fingers trembling as if gripped by unseen hands. Suddenly, a corona of lights flared across the city. Batteries roared to life, autocannons spat fire, and for a brief moment the streets blazed with imperial fury. The abominations were torn apart in droves. But then Korun screamed. Blood streamed from her eyes as she staggered. Her voice broke into a whisper. This system, it's alive. Something else is controlling it. Felix Harrow rushed to her side, pressing medpacks against her wounds. Stay with us. They can't take your blood, not you. Meanwhile, Vus's fire was merciless. Her aim, already unnatural, now seemed beyond human. The lasgun jerked and turned as if guided by some hidden intelligence, striking targets before they even moved. For an instant, Vark felt a chill. It was as though her weapon already knew where the enemy would fall. Then the sight that froze them all appeared. The cathedral's gates split open. From within emerged a towering figure, built in the mockery of a man's frame but sheathed in armored steel. Its arms spun like living engines, crimson light pulsing through the veins of its body. Its voice shook the city. We are only the beginning. This world is but a seed. Our fleet is coming, and your Imperium will not stop it. Vark's heart clenched. This was the same fleet he had glimpsed in the warp dreams, an endless armada, living and mechanical fused together, an enemy vast enough to shake the very foundations of the galaxy. He turned to his soldiers, voice iron hard. This isn't about saving one planet. This is the first wind of the storm. If we fail here, this seed will take root across the stars. His squad nodded. They understood. There was no retreat, no surrender. But beneath their defiance, another question festered like a wound. Were they themselves slowly becoming the very creatures they fought? Was this war only against the enemy before them, or against the darkness awakening inside? The colossal figure that emerged from the cathedral loomed over the city, each step shaking the earth. Its body pulsed, metal fused with living flesh, throbbing as though it were not just a machine, but some vast, breathing beast. It raised an arm, bladed claws spread wide, and between them a beam of incandescent light tore forth, splitting the street, melting stone into rivers of slag. The soldiers instantly fell into position. Vark shouted above the roar, "This is it! If it falls, the city is ours. If it stands, we are finished." Vus fired first, las beams cutting through the dark and striking the monster's eyes. For an instant, the giant staggered, but its counterattack came like a storm. Waves of energy blasted from its arm, hurling Vus to the ground. And yet, impossibly, she rose again, as though some unseen power steadied her. Corin was already locked into the city's systems, her body trembling, blood streaming from her eyes. Her voice thundered like lightning itself. "I'm seizing the heart of the city. The cathedral is its core." Suddenly, the entire defense grid awoke. Missiles streaked from rooftops, cannons roared, hundreds of autoguns spat fire at the towering abomination. Harrow, struggling to keep the wounded alive, snarled through gritted teeth. "Even machines can die. We just have to remind it what mortality feels like." Thal hurled an entire belt of grenades at the creature's feet. Explosions thundered, forcing the giant to stumble, its balance breaking for the first time. Vark saw it, the flicker of insight, a vision of what was about to come, a glimpse of the path ahead. His eyes lit as if the future itself had whispered in his mind. "All fire on the chest," he roared. "That's where its heart lies." The squad unleashed everything. Las fire, missiles, and grenades converged on a single point. Light and fire ripped through the night. The monster's scream shook the city, half human, half machine, a howl of agony that split the heavens. Cracks split its armored shell, burning flesh tore apart, and with a final earth-shaking crash, the beast fell. Silence followed. Then the sky turned red. From orbit, titanic shadows descended, not ships, not in the way the Imperium knew them, but the fleet Vark had seen in his dreams. Living and mechanical fused together, hundreds of vessels moving as one body, a single colossal organism sweeping down upon the world. Vark lifted his gaze to the sky, his voice grim and steady. "That was only a battle. The true war begins now." And in that moment the soldiers felt it too. Not fear, but the old fire that had carried them through every trial. The blood of Castria burned in their veins once more. The sky burned red. The fleet descending from orbit was no armada of ships. It was a living abomination. Every vessel was forged of flesh and metal, bound together like organs of a single monstrous being. The soldiers of Verax 9 held their lines. Captain Vark looked to his squad, Korun, blood still streaming from her eyes yet commanding the storm. Vus, her aim impossibly perfect. Thal, his sharpened senses reading the enemy's intent before they struck. Harrow, holding broken warriors together with sheer defiance. Then the fleet attacked. From above rained torrents of burning light, the ground quaking under the fury of their weapons. But the soldiers knew retreat was no longer possible. Vark roared above the chaos. "This is our trial. If we fall, the Imperium falls. If we stand, humanity breathes." The squad struck back. Corin drew on the city's power grid, tearing so much energy through her veins that the cathedral roof split open and a storm of lightning raged across the heavens. Vus fired with inhuman precision, every beam striking the heart of the fleet. Thal guided his comrades, sensing the enemy's movements before they came. And Harrow, binding wounds, lifting the fallen, keeping men alive long enough to fight once more. The fleet's voice thundered across the void. "You defy annihilation, but annihilation is inevitable. Your corpse god has abandoned you." Vark raised his pistol to the sky and bellowed, "The Imperium protects, not for reward, not for glory, but because we are the last wall." And in that moment, the golden light returned. The same radiant figures that had once stood with them at Base 47 Delta now filled the sky. Their brilliance struck the abomination fleet, and cracks split its armored shell. Vark seized the moment. "Now, everything you have." One final storm was unleashed. Lightning, fire, steel, and faith roared as one. The fleet screamed, its form fracturing, and with a shudder it withdrew, wounded but not destroyed, retreating into the dark abyss of space. Silence fell across the ruins of Verax 9. The soldiers stood bloodied, broken, yet unbowed. Inquisitor Dracos stepped forward, his voice heavy, cold. "You have saved the Imperium. But know this, The enemy will return, not for one world, but for the galaxy entire. You are no longer merely human. You are the Imperium's future." The squad exchanged weary glances. They had survived, but at the cost of their humanity. Vark raised his eyes to the heavens, where fragments of the broken fleet burned as they vanished into the void. His words were quiet but unyielding. "Castria is dead, but we are not. And while we live, the enemy will never claim full victory." The light faded. The battle was done. But deep within, each soldier knew the truth. The real enemy was not only out there in the stars. The real enemy had already awakened inside.